Welcome, everybody. I want to begin by thanking Zach and Rayanne for offering this very groovy setting free of charge because she cares about the community. So thank you, Zach and Rayanne.
Hey, I'm right here. You're welcome.
Our program tonight is sponsored by the Salty Jester, Starry Skies North, the Voyageurs Conservancy, which is the nonprofit partner of Voyageurs National Park, and the Rotary Club of International Falls. I grew up basically taking the dark sky for granted. You'd look up on any clear night and you could see the Milky Way. If you're lucky, you could see Northern Lights, and really didn't appreciate that 80% of our country never sees these kinds of things. If you aren't rushed and have some time to spend under the night sky, you can look up at what is essentially a time machine. The light that's reaching your eyes started ages ago, and it kind of shrinks my problems. I feel small in a good way in the vastness of the universe. Since Voyageurs National Park sought and obtained a dark sky designation, we have become an attractant for astrotourists. In the past 6 weeks, I've personally met 6 people who traveled here from other states, one from Puerto Rico. Steve, I think you and Liz met that person at a stargazing event. I don't take our dark sky for granted anymore. Before we begin our program, I'd like to introduce someone in the audience today. It's Kendra Kirsting. She is a field fellow. A field fellow is a early career employee at Voyageurs National Park, and they're here getting field experience on the projects that are going on in the park, whether it's the Voyageurs Wolf Project or invasive species. And Kendra is the Winter Sky field fellow. So she's in the right place tonight, learning some more about the dark sky. She's a Minnesota native, but was working in in national parks outside of Minnesota. Came back last year to be an interpretive ranger at Namakan, and this opportunity presented itself, and she took it because she's had a long time interest in the dark sky. Please welcome Kendra, if you would. Make her feel welcome. Our main speaker tonight is Todd Burlet. He is a delegate for the Dark Sky International, which has been the world's leading authority on light pollution since 1988. Todd is co-founder, board member, and president of Starry Skies North, the Minnesota and Mid-Continent chapter of Dark Skies International. Starry Skies North is an all-volunteer 501c3 nonprofit corporation engaged in educational outreach and advocacy in support of their mission to protect the sky, the earth, and all life form from light pollution. Todd is a member of the American Astronomical Society, the Union of Concerned Scientists, the American Association.
Saved it there. I was just going to turn you up just a little bit, Jeff, so we can hear you in the back a little bit.
Okay, thanks for doing that.
Is that better back there? Anybody? Everybody? Good? Okay, sorry, Jeff.
Thank you. Oh, my voice is, there it is. The American Association for the Advancement of Science, the Society for Light and Lighting. Todd is a retired staff engineer and engineering manager and holds a BA in physics. During his 37-year career in the aerospace industry, Todd developed flight control, navigation, and radar systems for the commercial, military, and space markets, and developed 7 patents. Todd is a lifelong amateur astronomer and photographer, and when he's not advocating for dark skies, he enjoys landscape and nightscape photography, wilderness canoeing, scuba diving, and globetrotting in pursuit of solar eclipses. Please welcome Todd Burlet.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for that wonderful introduction, and Kendra, great to connect with you, and I just want to repeat what Jeff said in terms of thanking all the folks that made this possible, the Salty Jester, Voyageurs Conservancy, Voyageurs National Park, and the Rotary Club, and my organization, Starry Skies North. So what I want to do here is spend about 20-25 minutes going through about 20 slides. About half of them are going to be on some of the impacts that we experience from light pollution. And then I'm going to turn it around, flip that on its head, and talk about the economic opportunities that the lack of light pollution that you have here in International Falls, it gives you in terms of, well, astrotourism in general. Okay, and then after that, if we've got a few questions, I'll take some right up front. Then I'm going to get out of the way. We're going to watch, if you haven't seen it, it's a sumptuous documentary called Northern Night Starry Skies. And then time permitting, I'll come back if you have more questions at the end, and we'll cover that. So with that, let's get going. All right, this is the slide that I call "Everyone Cares About Light Pollution, they just don't know it yet." And what I mean by that is if you start to look at, I'm gonna make sure which button is which, it's dark in here, but I like dark. There we go. Okay, everything from helping our seniors maintain their independence as they move through cities and urban spaces. Sustainability, big buzzword these days, of course. Awe, natural darkness. We already heard Jeff talk a little bit about that. We've all had that experience of seeing that Milky Way, seeing that aurora. We'll talk a little bit about that. Certainly the wildlife and ecosystems that we value so much up here. We'll come back, we'll save, I knew that would happen. We'll save astrotourism to the end. Health and wellness. Every time I turn around, there's been another study that comes out about the relationship between artificial light at night and human health and wellness. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll touch just very briefly on environmental justice and cultural heritage issues. Okay, this is a map from coming up on a decade ago now. This is satellite data of what it looks like when a satellite looks down on the United States. All of those colors that you're seeing there, those reds, those yellows, that's light pollution. And I'll point out really about, well, Mississippi would be here. This is kind of the edge of the Great Plains, and you can just see that dichotomy between the eastern and the western half of the United States. In the eastern half of the United States, there are three tiny little areas, well, two tiny little areas and one not so tiny little area where you can still see a pristine night sky. There's a little spot here, and it's much smaller than it appears on this map, in central Maine. There's a little spot right up here. Let's see, where's the Keweenaw Peninsula? That would be right about here, Copper Harbor, if you're familiar with that. And then, drum roll please, in your backyard, here you are right there, 2.5 million acres of pristine dark skies. And that is more dark skies than the entire rest of the eastern half of the United States combined. And it's right out your front door. Zooming in a little bit, we won't spend too much time on this. So here you are again, here's you. Here's the Iron Range, Duluth, Minneapolis down here. I live right about there. Guess what? I can't see the Milky Way. I can't see the aurora. You guys can. And that's becoming something rare, and I think that creates opportunity. So here's the spaces. We've got Voyageurs National Park. We've got right across the border, of course, Quetico, and then just to your east, what's now the world's second largest international dark sky sanctuary in the Boundary Waters Canoe area. Okay, before we jump into all of the negative ramifications of light pollution, I'd like to kind of talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, because this is, by and large, the first question that comes up, or the first issue that people raise of, I gotta have light because I need to be safe. And what I always tell people is it's not that simple. The relationship that we have between light and safety is not what we think it is. It's not what we would like it to be. We would love it to be a magic wand where we could just wave light around and we would be safe and there wouldn't be crime. Unfortunately, after decades of research on both sides of the Atlantic, there's no scientific consensus that there's actually any relationship there. Now, it can help us feel safer. We've all been there, done that, right? That thing that goes thump in the night and we turn on the light and we discover it was the cat or a branch or something like that. And that has some value. But in terms of actually making us safer, it's actually counterproductive to think that that's the case, because what can happen is we do things like lower our guard. We think, oh, the magic light is on, now I'm safe, and we're not taking the same precautions that we otherwise would. The other thing that happens is a lot of times those lights that we turn on are these glary lights that are shining in our eyes, and that can actually make things worse, because the human eye is amazing. It has the ability, and I love this, to see from the brightest thing that it can tolerate to the dimmest thing it can see in the darkest night, 100 million times brightness. So the dimmest thing that they can see is 100 million times dimmer than the brightest thing that they can tolerate without damage. But not all at the same time. We've all been in that case where you walk in, today we were just talking about this, you walk in from that bright snowy landscape and you're temporarily blinded. It takes a while for your eye to adapt to that darker environment. And that's what happens when we have these glary lights that we put on our houses that shine into our eyes instead of shining on objects, which is what they should be doing. We actually get blinded and we lose our ability to see into those shadows. It's called veiling luminance, and that can actually make us less safe because we think we're safe when actually we've created a dark space for someone to be lurking that really shouldn't be there. And then other things, overly bright lights. This happened down in St. Paul. I talked to some residents over there. What happened is they used to have a vibrant neighborhood, and the city came in, put in these blue bright lights, and it was garish, and it drove all of the families off of the streets. They went inside, closed their shades, and they left the streets to the people that maybe shouldn't have been there in the first place. So we could talk for weeks about this topic, but just the takeaway is it's not a simple matter of more light makes me safer. It's actually very complicated, and it can actually backfire on you. Okay, Alan. So you'll hear me use the term Alan a few times. Artificial light at night. So if you hear me talking about Alan, it's not some guy I hate. It's artificial light at night. And here are some of the health risks. We won't go into these in great detail, but breast cancer was the first one to be recognized as being associated with artificial light at night with Alan. And this happened in the 1960s when researchers noticed that breast cancer rates were rising in the developed world, in Europe and in America, except for one group of women, blind women. They figured out that because they couldn't see that blue light, they weren't having the circadian interruptions that blue light was causing for the women who could see that blue light. Since then, the last 60 years, all of these other types of cancer have been associated again and again with extensive research. I'm going to get a nickel for every time I press the wrong button. Prostate cancer, guys, guess what? It's not just the women, it's guys too. Sorry about that. Disease, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. There was just a latest research that came out this week. Stroke risk goes up. So that's still preliminary. We need a couple more researchers to validate that. But it just shows that we're learning as we go the relationship between light and physical health, but also mental health, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and then PTSD symptom outcomes. It turns out the timing of when you are exposed to blue light versus those warm amber red lights can make a very positive or negative impact on how you're doing in dealing with PTSD. Okay, so I talked about helping our seniors stay independent. Here's a couple of things that happen. So we talked about that adaptation as we come in from that bright snowy scape and it takes longer for our eyes to adjust. Or if we're driving down the road and we've got those bright glary headlights that are shining in our eyes, or those street lights that are shining in our eyes. Older eyes, our irises are a little bit slower. So as they're being exposed to that harsh light, that's actually causing pain because those irises can't shut down fast enough. And then once that bright light is passed, they're going to stay a little bit longer in that blind state where you just can't see because you're temporarily blinded. So that's not a feeling any of us want to have. So that's going to limit their comfort level in getting out there. The next one that I think about is something that I call the dirty windshield effect. As we get older, we accumulate more cellular junk in our eyes. And think about it the same way as you do about the crap that we all had on our windshields this week, right? And especially if you're trying to drive into the sun, so you've got that glare hitting all of that schmoo that's on the front of your windshield. And that causes all of that scatter. There's plenty of light around. It's not a question of whether there's enough light or not. The problem is it's scattering off of your windshield, or in the case of our seniors, it's scattering off of things inside of their eye. And that's actually reducing their ability to see, even though they've got the same amount of light that the rest of us do. No, I think I'm one of the seniors at this point. And then clutter. As we age, some of our mental processes slow down, including our visual processing. So you've got a busy visual scene like this with all of these glary lights shining at you, demanding your attention. It's going to take you just that much longer to sort out which are the ones I care about, which are the ones that I don't care about. And it's during those moments that everyone's at risk, whether they're the driver, they're pedestrian, or they're just trying to find their way along the sidewalk and trying to figure out if that's a crack or a stick or whatnot. So adding all of those three things together, we're just creating, or can create, if we're using light in the wrong way, a very challenging visual environment. And there are some very simple things that we can do, and we'll talk about those in a minute, that would really make it a lot easier for them to continue to move in the environment. Okay, ecosystems, algae growth. This one blew me away when I first got into this. Algae, guess what? Algae is a plant. Some of you knew that. And of course, when we add light, what's that? That's energy. So the algae growth goes up when we're shining lights into the lakes and rivers that we have around here. The other thing that happens is algae gets eaten. It gets eaten by little zooplankton, which then later get eaten by the things that we like to eat, bass and walleye and what have you. But zooplankton are afraid of light because they're going to get eaten by the bass and the walleye. So during the day, they sink down to the bottom of the lake, and then at night, when it's safe for them to do so, they rise up and they chow down on the algae until we put lights in that shine into the water. And now we've got a 1-2 punch. We've got more algae, we've got less algae eaters, and we have algae blooms. When it comes to the fish themselves, we're really making it harder for things that we care about, the walleye and the bass. Walleye are having a tough time catching the things that they like to eat, including the zooplankton and the little minnows, because now they can see them coming. They can see the walleye coming and they can get out of the way. Bass, meanwhile, have a very similar effect as we do when we're exposed to all this artificial light at night. It messes with their biorhythms, and they spend all night in a heightened state of alertness, that fight or flight mode. So rather than conserving their calories at night, they're up all night, burning through energy, burning through calories. That makes them less fit to be parents. That makes them less fit to go out and hunt the next day. And so we have fewer bass, fewer walleye, and then the ones that we do have are smaller. Similar thing with the birds. They're having a lot of trouble with not just building strikes, but what we call disorientation. And when they're flying into areas, they can get lost, and really makes it very difficult. Once they get to where they're going, we've fragmented their habitats by lighting up some of these spaces along our county roads and that sort of thing. So they don't have the choices that they would otherwise have in terms of where they're going to hunt, where they're going to raise their young. And oftentimes they're making a darned if you do, darned if you don't decision. They either have to pick someplace with food, shelter, water, or they have to pick someplace that's dark, and they can't have both. And so they're going to end up in a lose-lose situation. And that makes it harder on bird populations. Sustainability, this is actually, I love this. This is a liquor store by my house. It's 2 blocks away. This is not a trick of perspective. That light literally is shining at a 45-degree angle up into the sky. I'm not going to go through all of these numbers, but you can look at some of them yourself. You can see really what's happening with wasted light. It's not the light that even reaches our eyes. It's light like this that's shining up into the sky. About a third of it is just totally wasted. A third of all of our outdoor lighting is wasted. And that translates to about $10 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. About $10 for every man, woman, and child here in International Falls. And I think we could come up with better things to do with an extra $10 a piece. It's probably good for a cup of coffee or something, rather than throwing it at lighting that's just not going anywhere. And that translates to about 60 million trees that we would have to plant in this country every single year just to make up for the excess light that's just going nowhere and it's never going to hit anybody's eye. Environmental justice, I won't talk about this too much other than to point out that it kind of falls into two categories. There's the light as a weapon that we have used for centuries, going back to the lantern laws in the 18th century, where if you weren't white, you were required by law to carry a lantern around after sunset to identify yourself as not being a white person. Fast forward that. These days, what happened, probably most infamously, if any of you are familiar with what happened out here in New York, this is what's called the Omnipresence Program. This was a brilliant idea to deal with crime in the projects, and Mayor de Blasio thought it would be a great idea to go out, get stadium lights, put them on diesel generators that were loud, they were stinky, and they were attended by police officers, and they were going to put these all around all of the projects in New York, and they did. And crime went down. Like, hooray, crime went down, right? Well, when they went back and looked at why crime went down, it went down because there was no one left on the streets. All of the neighborhoods had been shattered. Everyone was inside, hiding behind not one, but 2 layers of blackout curtains just to get away from these stadium lights. So that's the overt, if you will, weaponization of light. The other thing that happens is not intentional, but it's still happening to BIPOC communities, people that are socially, economically a little bit lower on that ladder, because they tend to have night jobs, second and third shift, or because they are maybe having a little bit lower income level, they tend to be living along transportation corridors where there's going to be street lights, what have you. And so generally speaking, they're exposed to twice the artificial light at night, twice the Allen as the rest of us. And that, of course, then has those health and wellness impacts that we were talking about a minute ago. Cultural heritage. It's official, guys. There are exactly 88 constellations in the sky. That's it. The International Astronomical Unit decided about 100 years ago that we needed to have a common language to talk about things in the sky so that we could find where something was by talking about this constellation or that constellation. So that's great. We can all now talk about Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, and everyone knows where those are, if you're a scientist at least. But what that stripped away, of course, was the fact that across the entire planet, throughout recorded history and throughout time, cultures have developed their own stories, their own relationships with that night sky and the things that are in the night sky. And it wasn't just stories that they put up in the night sky. Those stories were there to pass along their cultural norms, their behaviors, their right and wrong ways of living. And oftentimes that's where their deities were put, or their ancestors. And as we have brightened the night sky, we are breaking those cultural connections, because now if you're an Anishinaabe, you can't go out and see the River of Souls, which is where those who have departed are moving into the afterlife, what we call the Milky Way. Or those campfires of your distant relatives, which of course are the stars. And that's true, and that's happening with every culture, not just the Anishinaabe, whether it's the folks that are coming over, the Hmong that are coming over and living in Minneapolis or what have you. So around the world, We are breaking our connections to our past cultures. And these cultures really are the essence of who we are as peoples, whether we're Europeans or Anishinaabe or Hmong or what have you. So it's really sad to see those connections being broken. And then, of course, this is how I got interested in the subject in the first place, and I think how a lot of us come to the idea of light pollution, which is this idea of the sky is awesome, right? We've talked about that. Going outside and seeing that Milky Way, seeing that aurora, seeing those stars dazzling on a cold winter night. There's nothing like it. I tell people, I feel like that's when the world slows down for me, and I feel like I can breathe. And whatever happened during the day, whatever kind of meetings went poorly, it doesn't matter quite as much now, because you know what? You can go out and you look at those stars, and those are the stars that were there when you were a kid. Those are the stars that are going to be there when your children are grown. And it just, Jeff said it great. It makes you feel a little bit smaller, and it makes you pause and reconsider your relationship to the greater world around you. And it's not just feeling that way. It's actually been scientifically studied. Our good friends, the sociologists, look at this, and that's exactly what they find. They find it reduces stress and boosts creativity. I can't try myself out of a cardboard box, so I can't say anything about whether it helps with creativity, but it certainly helps with stress. Increases social positivity, altruism, and connectedness. I think the world could use a little bit more connectedness and altruism. And then, of course, it leads to more ethical and generous behavior. In other words, it just makes us better members of the community, all by just going out and experiencing the night sky, taking a breath, taking a moment, and enjoying what's around us. Okay, so I've talked too long about light pollution bad. Now we're going to talk about lack of light pollution good. What have you guys got here, and why does it matter? And boy, does it matter. Okay, so what do you guys offer? Hopefully, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but I think it's worth repeating what you guys have here, because it's easy to kind of forget, because you wake up in it every day. You are the gateway, as I mentioned, to the largest remaining dark skies in the eastern half of the United States, 2.5 million acres. It is the best auroral viewing location in the lower 48. That's not just a brag, that's a fact, because the Earth's geomagnetic North Pole is directly north of us. So if you go further east towards Maine or Michigan, it's further to the geomagnetic North Pole, and therefore further from the aurora. Same thing if you go west, you go out to the Dakotas, you go out to Wyoming, you go out to Montana. It's harder to see the aurora there than it is right here. So this is the place to be. Cultural astronomy, obviously we've got some great cultural resources that are very interested in talking about their culture and their relation between their culture and the night sky. And tourists, I can tell you from my own experience, are so interested in learning about those different cultures. Installed base of tourism, obviously, and your low horizons. It's great for the aurora. Where I live, and even here, the aurora are often right along the horizon. It's a lot easier to see that across a big fetch of water than it is if you've got a lot of pine trees. So your water is actually one of the assets that's going to help you see the aurora just that much better. I meant what I wrote here. International Falls is uniquely positioned to create lifelong memories and life-changing experience of the night sky. Think about those families where those kids are coming up and they're going out and they're seeing the Milky Way for the first time. They're seeing the aurora for the first time. Do you think they're going to come back? I think so. Economic considerations. Economics 101. Dwindling supply. Light pollution is growing at a rate of 10% a year. Every 7 years, the night sky is twice as bright. Think about that. How many times that has doubled in our lifetimes. Dwindling supply, increased demand. Anyone tried to go out and get a campsite lately? Reservations are tough to come by. Everyone, especially after COVID, during COVID and even after COVID now, everyone is just thirsty to get out there and increase demand. Low to no startup costs, turn off a few lights. If you've got a business, if you want to start a business, it costs almost nothing to lean into astrotourism. So Economics 101, it's just kind of a no-brainer. Shoulder seasons, perfect for astrotourism. Weather's mild, the skeeters are gone. The kids, you can get them out just after supper and it's a nice dark sky. And those are the times where it's a little bit leaner around here. You're having trouble putting more heads in beds because, a lot of the summer folks have gone away. It's a great way to fill up those heads in beds during the shoulder season. And a proven track record. We won't run through all of this, but here's a number of economic studies that have looked at this. After a region has been declared an international dark sky site, such as Voyager's, 100, 200, 300% growth in tourism. And you say, well, great, these are places that are far-fetched all around the world. Or the Colorado Plateau, $500 million a year, $10,000 a year. That's not, 10,000 jobs per year. That's not one time. That's every year, summer after summer after summer. They are hiring 10,000 more people just within the national park system. This doesn't count even the cities that are around the national parks. This is just the lodging within the national parks. They're bringing in $500 million a year extra after they've been certified as a dark sky site. And I know you say, well, gee, we're not the Colorado Plateau. No, you're not. But you're also not West Cliff and Silver Cliff, Colorado, populations 546 and 645, where they brought in $100,000 every year when their area was certified as an international dark sky place. So, real money to be had, guys. A few business ideas. We won't go through this too much. We're running a little bit short of time, but I call it integrate, innovate, and initiate. If you've got a business already, just integrate some new elements to that. Maybe if you've got a restaurant, a little dining under the stars. If you've got some lodging, great. Go out and let people sit outside, have some s'mores, turn some lights off, and let them do dark skies. Innovate, maybe add a few elements of some offerings if you're going to start renting binoculars or telescopes or what have you. Or initiate, start a new business. Okay, so great. Now I've got you all convinced that it's in your best interest, both from human health and wellness standpoint and from an economic standpoint, to stay dark. How do you do that? It's easy. 5 principles. If light doesn't have a purpose, it shouldn't be on. It shouldn't have gone in the first place, but if it's in, just turn it off. Done and done. If it is on, make sure it's targeted. Make sure that it's shielded so that light is going down on the ground, lighting up the things that we want it to light up, not our eyeballs. Keep that light out of our eyeballs. Low light levels. Light is a tool, and I tell everyone, think of it as you would any other tool. I've got a sledgehammer. I love my sledgehammer, but it's not the tool I use when I'm hanging a picture on the wall, right? I want to size that tool to what I need. So I don't need the brightest possible light I can buy if I'm just trying to light up the 10 feet from my house to the sidewalk. Think about low light levels, controlled, putting them on those motion detectors, putting them on those timers. So in the middle of the night when no one's up, maybe that light goes off. And then color. That color temperature is so critical for human health. You want to look for things that are 3,000 Kelvin or less. And they're widely available. You walk into any hardware store, you're going to find those warm colors. And here's a great graphic. It's simple. Last time I checked, none of us live up here. We all live down here. Why don't we put the light down here where it's going to do us some good? And then again, this idea of maybe putting a timer or a motion detector. So the idea isn't to get rid of light. Light is an important part of our modern society. We love light. We need light. It offers a lot of benefits. We just want to make sure that we're using light a little bit more wisely. Simple ideas for homes and businesses. Close your curtains at night. Keep that indoor light indoors, and that's going to make things a little bit easier on the critters that are living outside. Follow those 5 principles that we talked about. Use Dark Sky's checklist to self-certify your home. I don't know if you've seen it out back. There's a little QR code. It's great to do if you've got family. It's just 5 quick checklist questions. You self-certify and go through and say, yep, I got some good lighting. You can print off a certificate. It's a great family activity. And then, of course, support the businesses with good lighting, because those are the ones that are helping draw that economic activity into your town. For your businesses, this is brand new. Dark Sky International just launched a Dark Sky Lodging certification. So just like we've got the International Dark Sky Place certifications for Voyagers and what have you, now if you have any kind of a business that has lodgers, and so that's everything from resorts, retreat centers, campgrounds, hotels, motels, you name it, you can now go out and get certified as Dark Sky Friendly Lodging, and then promote yourselves as just exactly that, and draw those tourists that are coming in to your place of business. And then we, Starry Skies North, are actually expanding that here in Minnesota to any business that wants to be Dark Sky Friendly. We will come in, we will certify you, and then again, you can advertise yourselves as that. As a city, think about enacting a lighting ordinance that fits your city. I mean, we get it. There's industry, there's commerce, there's residences, there's wild areas. Great, write an ordinance that takes those zones into consideration so that we can make sure we keep our industrial workers safe while also keeping the lights out of wild areas. And this is what we see everywhere. Just like you have different zonings for commercial spaces, industrial spaces, do the same thing with your lighting so that you can have your cake and eat it too. Migrate to Dark Sky Friendly city lights. Create a bulb buyback program so that people with these blue bright lights on their houses, the city can maybe buy them back. Lots of different ideas. These are just some ideas to think about. Develop some astro-specific festivals. We've got, I got to tell you, I'm working as I speak with Ely's first ever Astro Festival is this January. Silver Bay, pivoting from an industrial base to a tourism base. Their first festival is coming up this October. So northern Minnesota is really leaning into this idea of how do we take advantage of what astrotourism can do for us economically. Stand out with a city proclamation. It's proclamation season. I can explain afterwards what that is and what that does for you. And then think about creating what's called an urban night sky place. So that's where people can stay right here in town and enjoy some stars. And then you can also get certified. The entire community can get certified as an international dark sky community. And that would be a great pairing with what's going on with Voyagers National Park. So you can just take what Voyagers has already achieved and expand that to include the community. And that's it. I said 25, it's been 31. I'm sorry. I'll shut up. I can take a couple minutes of questions, and then I know you're all anxious to get into the documentary. So if anyone's got any questions now, we'll take a couple, and then we'll transition right over to the documentary. Questions?
What does a Dark Sky Festival look like?
Dark Sky Festivals are really whatever people want them to be. They're usually multilateral. So it's everything from in libraries and in bookstores, having some authors come in, or just somebody that's going to read great children's stories about the night sky to the kids. Having astronomers, some of the local astronomical clubs coming out with their telescopes, doing some stargazing, doing some astrophoto how-to sessions, doing some art and poetry readings and shows, and then doing some seminars. We'll come in and talk about things such as what we just talked about here, about why it matters. Watch some videos such as what we're about to watch here with Northern Nights, Starry Skies. And really, whatever the community wants it to be, that's going to resonate with the residents. And then also, what's going to draw in the tourists? What do we, as International Falls, think our tourists want to see when they come up here? Do they want to have maybe a bus that's going to take them out and show them a nice shoreline where they can sit and have a great view of the Milky Way? Create those access opportunities that some of your visitors wouldn't normally have. So really kind of the, no pun intended, sky's the limit.